We are back to bring you sumo deadlifting. We're going to start with mobility and stability, just like we did last week for conventional. But this week we're going to focus on sumo, a little more, what did you say, adductor, hip, external rotation-y?
Yeah.
So, yeah, stick around.
Everything on how to cheat the deadlift.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're going to learn how to be stronger and cheat better.
Yeah.
All right. First point of mobility for this sumo deadlift, we're going to call this one the tactical frog. So Chris is going to get down on the ground here. And he's going to get into something that you probably have seen called a goalie stretch. So he's going to get himself into external rotation. So he's going to open up at the hips here. Something we don't want to do is extend our low back. Rather, we want to bring our ribs down, stack the pelvis, and have a nice neutral spine here. The point of the tactical frog is to also drive your knees into the ground. You're going to do that for about 3 to 5 seconds, and you're going to release. Do that for about 5 rounds, and every time you do that, you're going to get deeper into your external rotation. Something else you can do with this movement is you can actually get yourself into internal rotation as well. So while you're on the ground in external rotation, you can lift up at the knee, hold that, and release. We're going to do it to both sides. And this is a really good mobility drill to start off for the sumo deadlift.
All right, so next thing we're going to go over is what we're just going to go ahead and call the 3-point groin stretch. So what you're going to do here is going to require a kettlebell, which is going to help give you a little bit more of a stretch here. The main thing here is the leg that's kneeling here. You want your foot to kind of be at an angle, not straight back behind you. So just got a nice ankle back here. And this leg we're stretching forward. Try to open it up to right around your normal sumo stance. Now what you're going to do is just slowly track over the knee. That's the big thing here, is you want your knee tracking over your toes. You don't want it tracking outward or inward over. So come down slowly, hold for a few seconds here. You'll feel a real nice stretch to your adductors. And when you're coming back, you want to use your opposite glute to squeeze to kind of pull you back through. You're going to stretch down, come back up. Do it about 3 or so times. And what you're going to do next is you're going to move it outward even more. And without turning your torso, so keep your torso nice and straight, same position here, and keep working your leg back and forth. So as you progress, you can open up more. The main thing here is keeping your knee over toe. You actually see right here, Amber's now in a position where her toe, or her knee is not tracking over her toe like it should be, so she's too far out. So what she should do is bring her foot back in like she just did, and then come back. Repeat that on both sides about 3 to 4 times in each position to get nice and warmed up.
All right, what's up everybody? So last movement through our mobility sequence for the sumo deadlift, we're going to do some work on the hip flexors as there is a pretty large demand on hip extension for the sumo deadlift. We need to make sure that we're spending some time on our hip flexors. So I'm going to have Amber here do a hip flexor stretch with a thoracic rotation because there is also a big demand on the T-spine to get T-spine extension in the start position for our sumo deadlift. So she's going to get down into a deep lunge position here. Before she actually pushes her hip forward, we're going to make sure that she tucks her pelvis underneath her. Good, we're making sure that there's no arch through the lumbar spine, so she's going to tuck her pelvis underneath her, and she's going to use her glute to push her hip forward. So she's going to squeeze her glute, get into a good hip extension. And then what she's going to do once she gets into that deep stretch in her hip flexor, she's going to place her hand on the floor here. She's going to take her left arm, she's going to have it underneath her. She's going to take a big breath in. And then she's going to reach overhead, and she's going to make sure that she's primarily rotating through her T-spine, and that she's not rotating through her torso here and her lower back. Another important thing to note is that as she's reaching overhead, she's breathing out nice and slow, and she's kind of just relaxing into this overhead position. She's holding here, and she's completely letting go of any air that she has in her chest really kind of just letting that sink in. And she's gonna do that every time. As she reaches overhead, she's gonna breathe out as much as she can. She's gonna empty out her lungs, and she's gonna try to get a little bit farther every time. There you go. It's a hip flexor stretch with thoracic rotation. Now we are ready to move into actual movement prep for the sumo deadlift. Now that we've gotten our body nice and warmed up, we've got a couple sticky spots loosened up, so now we can actually go into movement prep. All right, guys, now we're going into our actual movement prep portion for the sumo deadlift. Starting off, we're going to show you a prone hip external rotation and internal rotation lift-offs as we're getting closer to actually approaching the bar for the deadlift. So I'm going to have Amber lie down on the ground here. It's important for the external rotation part of this that you have a block or something that you can place under your knee. So like I said, she's in the prone position here. She's going to place the block at her ankle. We're going to make sure that she's got a nice straight line here through our torso, and the front of her hip, she's going to make sure that as much of the front of her hip is in contact with the floor as possible. What she's going to do here is we're simply going to think about driving that ankle into the pad as much as we can to raise his knee off the floor. And we're going to make sure that we are not hiking the hip here to bring the knee off the floor. If the amount of range of motion that she can get here is simply getting the knee an inch or two off the floor, that's okay. We don't want to sacrifice position and get the movement from other areas of the body like the lower back by hiking the hip and twisting at the torso. So she's nice and neutral here. She's not compensating anywhere. She's simply just abducting and externally rotating her hip to raise it off the floor. She's holding that for a 2 to 3 count, and then she's lowering it back down. Good. All right. Very similar internal rotation aspect of this. We're going to do basically the exact same thing, but we're going to get rid of the block. And what she's going to do is she's going to focus on driving her knee into the floor as hard as she can to raise that heel to the ceiling. Now, same thing. We're not compensating by moving or twisting or hiking the hip. She's simply driving her knee into the floor and internally rotating the hip. So, good. She's coming up. She's holding for a 2 or 3 count. Coming back down, and then we're going to repeat that cycle on the other leg. Good.
All right, so now we're going to go over Copenhagen planks. A few different ways to do this. We're going to keep it simple, and Chris is going to demonstrate here. First, we're going to show kind of the more advanced version of it here, which is going to be starting with your foot on the bench. So, foot here, pretty much right at the ankle on the bench. This arm you want pretty much directly under your shoulder. So it's kind of like you're doing a side plank. So Chris is going to lift up at the hip. Hold this position right here. Biggest thing here is to keep your pelvis stacked, not rotating at the trunk at all, forwards or backwards. So keeping everything nice, tight, stacked, keeping everything in line. You want to hold this for pretty much as long as you can. Typically have people do it around like 20-30 seconds. And then release and go down. Now, this variation is going to be fairly difficult for most people to start with. So to regress this some, what you can do and what a lot of people should start with is putting your knee on the bench instead. This is going to alleviate a lot of pressure off the leg itself, but you're still going to get a huge benefit from this. So just knee on the bench, same thing. Squeeze the glutes, keep everything nice, tight, in line. Again, not twisting here at the torso, everything nice and straight. Now, if this is still too difficult for you, one other variation you can do is to pretty much do a side plank, but have a band here. So, hook a band up to a power rack or a cable crossover just like this. Chris is now going to get down the floor. Put this around his ankle. He's going to get to a regular side plank position. And he's simply just going to pull this leg down here and hold it. Now you can vary this also with different bands for different tension to make it harder. Or even do reps with it, which would also be a very good idea to get some blood flow in that area as well instead of just holding it statically. So if you're not able to do either of those variations, give this a try and have fun with it.
either.
Don't look over here.
Nose on the wall.
Some people.
All right, guys. Let's go to the last movement for our sumo deadlift video today. As you can tell in a lot of our warm-up videos, the last thing we do before we actually grab the bar is pretty specific and pretty similar to what we're actually going to be doing that day. So, I'm out of breath from the Copenhagens. I'm going to have Ransom perform a rolling Caustic squat. We're going to do this unloaded, and then we're going to do it with a kettlebell and tie in some thoracic extension because that's what we do in a sumo deadlift. So we're going to show the simple version of this. We're going to have Ransom get in his sumo stance, and he's going to lower his hips to pretty similar to where his hips will be in his start position. And all he's going to do here is he's going to rock from side to side, nice and slow. He's going to load that hip laterally as much as he can, and then he's going to come back over here and do the same thing on this opposing leg. And he's going to do this very controlled and intentional the entire time. Good. Good. So we're loading this hip laterally really nicely, and then we're getting a good stretch in our adductors on the opposing leg. So really taking the hip through just about every range of motion that we're going to be using it in the sumo deadlift. So that'll make this a little bit more difficult and to make it even a little bit more specific to a sumo deadlift. We're going to add a kettlebell aspect to it, and we're going to tie in thoracic extension here. So Ransom's going to do the exact same thing at the hips, but he's going to pick up the kettlebell thoracically, extending his upper back here and holding that position and doing the exact same thing. Good. Yep, so he's laterally loading that hip, rolling to this side, maintaining this thoracic extension the whole time. That's a lot harder. Yep, slow and controlled the entire time. So this might actually be a little bit too heavy of a kettlebell for Ransom to use, but you get the point though, right? We're in our sumo start position. We thoracic extend to hold the kettlebell. We rock side to side. Good. So there you go. Rolling Caustic squat with a kettlebell.
I hate you. You never let me have any fun.
Shut up, Brian.
Go back to your corner, Brian.
You're not my real dad.
Brian's out of timeout.
Go ahead.
I don't want to say anything. Tell them about your sumo things.
No.
How easy it is.
So that concludes our mobility and stability movement prep video for the sumo deadlift.
He's out of breath.
Why are you out of breath and sweaty?
Because it's really difficult.
Let me get this straight. So you did minimal movement and you're sweaty.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's harder than conventional?
It's way harder than conventional.
Okay.
So minimal movement makes you sweaty equals hard.
But also helps you cheat.
Doesn't say anything about you, just the deadlift? Okay. Thanks, guys. Come back next week.
Actual outcome.
Okay, but really. Like, subscribe. What's the notify?
Like,
There's three.
subscribe, and click the notification button.
Like,
Yeah, there you
to
go.
see when new videos pop up.
Yeah.
I watch
All the
those
buttons
videos.
that like help us help you.
Subscribe to our monthly magazine subscriptions. What? Never mind.
All right, we're idiots. See you later.